Unedited with Cameron Strang is brought to you by World Vision's upcoming Global 6K for Water. It's a one-day event on May 4th where people from all over the world walk and run 6K in their own neighborhoods to bring lasting clean water to children in need. Find out more and sign up at worldvision6k.org.
I'm Cameron Strang, and welcome to Unedited. My guest today is Jamie Tworkowski, founder of the mental health nonprofit To Write Love on Her Arms. For years, Jamie's been an advocate for mental health, but never really set out to make it his career. He got involved in the issue simply because he wanted to help a friend raise money for rehab, and it turned into a grassroots movement. He tells the story of how it all happened on this episode. It's fascinating. Today, Jamie travels the country speaking and helping people find help and healing through counseling and community. A few years ago, he wrote the New York Times best-selling book, If You Feel Too Much, Thoughts on Things Found and Lost and Hoped For. You should read it. Two things you should know about Jamie. He's a basketball fan. We've been friends for years, and he was in town to go to a game with me, as several of our recent guests have. Now, for you non-basketball fans, you'll be happy to know this season is ending, so no more basketball talk for a while. Second, we actually recorded this conversation a few weeks ago before Jamie got thrust into the national conversation around the Preachers and Sneakers Instagram account. You might have seen him quoted in the New York Times and other places. He's been outspoken on his thoughts about that phenomenon. And if you want to hear him talk about that, listen to episode 697 of the Relevant Podcast. We had Jamie and our friend Propaganda on to talk about it. The conversation you're about to hear is actually more about Jamie's story. To Write Love has been around 13 years now, so we talk about that journey, where they are, what he sees for the future. We talk about his own journey with mental health and changes he's made in his life and his role at the organization recently. It's vulnerable and real. It will be impactful for anyone who's ever stuck their neck out to try to make a difference. We also talk about mental health and how things have changed, especially in this generation. It's an important topic. Well, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Jamie Tworkowski. Well, thanks for coming.
Dude, I was already going to the game. I mean, It's a pretty sweet invitation.
I know. It's like, hey, if you're coming up for the game, swing by and let's do a podcast.
That's great.
I've known you for quite a while. It's been, let's see, you started To Write Love in what, 06?
06.
So knew you a couple years before that or in that era?
Yeah, and I've known you since the beginning of Relevant.
Right, 2000.
Was that, yeah?
Isn't that crazy?
Somebody mentioned, was it an office warming party that Mute Math played?
Yeah.
Someone mentioned that online the other day, and I was there, and she was there. And
that was 04.
Okay.
Yeah, it was before they had an album.
Yeah.
And they came down and we had rented a warehouse space, basically, or a flex space in the back of a warehouse. And I built a stage for that party.
Yeah.
And Mute Math came and played. That was pretty epic.
I was there. Totally.
Dude, that's nuts. That place is a Tesla dealership now.
Wow.
But, so I've been following you on Twitter, and one of my favorite things, and Instagram, one of my favorite things you're posting is the messages you're getting on Bumble where they don't know what it is that you do.
Yes.
And they're like, so you're a tattoo artist, or
that might have been the best one.
Yeah. So tell our listeners who, I want them to get to know you. Tell me about To Write Love on Her Arms.
So To Write Love on Her Arms started in 2006 here in Orlando, just as an attempt to help a friend, a girl who I met who quickly became a friend, who was denied entry into a local treatment center, probably a couple miles from where we're sitting. And my friend Renee was struggling with depression, addiction, self-injury, had attempted suicide previously, and spent the next 5 days living at the house I was living at the time. I was renting a room from a guy who we both knew, David McKenna, who has since passed away. And David was sort of a big brother figure in Renee's life, and recovery was a big part of David's story. And so he was very much kind of our leader and Renee's leader as it related to her stepping into treatment and her trying to get sober. And I was moved by getting to know this person and wrote a short story about it, wrote 2.5 pages and gave it the title To Write Love on Her Arms. The first t-shirt was designed by a guy who was working for you at the time. And that's a fun sidebar. My friend Corey Westerhold designed, we didn't think it was a logo. We certainly didn't think I was starting a nonprofit. We were
It's just like a shirt design.
Yeah, to try to sell a t-shirt to raise money for Renee's treatment. And this was back in the moment of MySpace in 2006. And so I created...
Just FYI, that era, that t-shirt that he designed for you looks very, very much like a certain cover that we were working on at that moment. So the typography, the dotted line were elements that one of the other designers was doing for the cover story and stuff. And Corey was a part of that and whatever. And it's just like, oh yeah, my buddy needs a shirt design. So these tools are like right there and we're kind of in this creative space, and boom, he threw that together for you. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so it had this really simple, small beginning. And very quickly, we learned that so many people could relate to Renee's story, that so many people knew what it was to lose a loved one to suicide or addiction. People were walking that road personally, someone writing in on behalf of, a friend or family member. And so my life changed pretty quickly back then. I was working a sales job for Hurley, the clothing brand, and ended up leaving that Hurley job a few months later and have been a part of this mental health conversation ever since. And, what started with me and a MySpace page and a box of t-shirts is now 17 people, full-time staff. We always have 5, 6, 7 interns that come from around the world. And through social media, through our own site, through music tours, festivals, conferences, a lot of different environments and settings, we get to try to invite people into a conversation about hope and help. We've been able to give more than $2 million that's gone directly to treatment and counseling. So the shortest version, just letting people know, hey, if you struggle in these ways, it's okay to be honest and it's okay to ask for help. And we've just seen so many surprising open doors over the last 13 years now.
It's been a big shift too. I mean, like I remember back then people didn't talk about counseling and mental health. And now it's like, everybody's talking about counseling and mental health and treatment and all that. And you guys have been a big part of that conversation even occurring,
Yeah, I hope so, even to be a small part of it. But I agree with you, and I'm thankful that that people talk about it now in so many circles. What'd
you major in college?
I went to community college, and then I did a semester at UCF, and I bailed out after that. And I was doing communication. It was organizational communication. And I think I was doing that because I didn't like the math in business, but I was already working full time in the surf industry. So when I was 18, from 18 to 22, I was working as an assistant sales rep for Quicksilver. And so I already had my foot in the door of what really was like my dream world. And so I didn't love school, and I worked for a guy who didn't go to college and didn't get it. He was just like, what do you mean you have a test tomorrow? So I ended up leaving. And I think if I were to, go back now or imagine myself there now, it would be very different than the things I was interested in back then.
But you were pursuing sales and stuff.
Yeah.
And then now you're leading a national conversation about mental health.
Yeah. And I didn't grow up knowing much about charities. I certainly grew up kind of in love with these brands, so I think that planted some seeds, and loved music, and there are dots that connect, but so much of it is a surprise for sure.
Talk about the arc of it. So you guys started 2006, you guys got your shirt on a bunch of bands and people started getting behind it. Obviously Renee got the help she needed.
Yeah.
And then it was like, holy cow, this thing's bigger than this.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, you guys won the Pepsi prize, right?
The Chase American Giving Awards. So we won $1 million. It happened 3 years. The final 2 were nationally televised. And so we were fortunate enough. That was December 2011 that we won the $1 million grant. So yeah, man, I mean, it's funny because I try to remind people we had such an unusual beginning, and I'm aware that it is so unusual, and there was so much privilege wrapped up because it was like we had money coming in and attention coming in before I meant to start an organization.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like in the first couple of years, you were working for Hurley, you knew apparel, you knew brands, and so you created one that stood for something.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wait, but we're about, like, you guys seem like you're still figuring out. A couple years to figure out, like, what are we about?
Sure.
More than
and
that.
even just how to get organized, how to build a team, the difference between leading a MySpace page and starting to lead a staff or just everything that came after or that came next. So I'm really thankful that 13 years in, we're still going, but by a lot of measurements, we're maybe in the best place we've ever been. I think we have the biggest team we've been able to have, and just we're able to make an impact into so many different groups of people. We were joking before we started about the video game, YouTube, kind of Twitch world, and we've had some traction there recently. So just all these places.
Wait, what are you doing there?
Like guys or people are fundraising. They're like playing video games to raise money to write Love on Our Arms, like on their Twitch channels.
Really?
Yeah. So just all these things where like I never could have dreamed that up or orchestrated it. And really the common thread is just that people have different interests, but these issues we talk about are issues that affect people. And so if you're someone who has been touched by, depression, addiction, anxiety, self-injury, you might use whatever platform you have. And so we've met. There was a guy at our office a week or two ago who is a fantasy football expert on ESPN. So just all these folks where like, it's just so neat. People use, and then it's also someone at lunch, in high school, and they're telling their 3 or 4 friends about it. Like but it's been really neat to just, I don't know, to be 13 years in and still going and still getting the chance to be creative. And then more than anything, just meeting and hearing from people who say, hey, I'm still alive because of what you do. And it's like, brings you back to the heart of it.
That's crazy. I mean, you guys are actually like, it's a life and death thing.
Yeah. People ask like, what's the best part, and I think the best part is certainly attached to the hardest part, which is just, it is that life or death. And certainly the best moments are, hey, I ended up getting help because of what I encountered, whether it was through a blog or a video or an event. And then we also, we hear from families that have lost a loved one to suicide or to an overdose, and both have a way of reminding you what's at stake.
Do you carry the weight of all that? Like, how do you, I couldn't imagine being a counselor. I couldn't imagine being somebody who's on the front lines of, there's so much pain, there's so much hurt out there. And like, okay, these people who are desperate for help are reaching out.
Yeah.
And you guys are hearing from them as well. Do you carry that with you?
Yeah. In certain moments for sure. It feels healthier today because we have a team and we have systems, and it's still human and it's still hard, but comparing, between our staff and interns, it's, there's like 25 of us compared to me and a MySpace page that was just overwhelming. It feels so much healthier now that it is so much bigger than me. But there are certainly moments that mess you up. And I was listening to your interview with Carl Lentz on the way over, and it's probably similar to him talking about dealing with criticism. Like he just said, I want to feel things. Like I don't want to get to the point where I don't care or I'm just numb. And I think for me, it's the same way. Like I'm not used to hearing about suicide. When someone tells me that, news still messes with me. Obviously it messes with you more when you have some connection to that person or family or community. But I'm thankful that 13 years in, like I still find it heartbreaking. But I'm also someone who struggles with depression. And sometimes people are surprised because I feel like I'm probably more or at least equally affected by my own stuff as opposed to only the weight of what I carry, if that makes sense. And so counseling has become a really important outlet, whether it's me processing my own life specifically or the weight of what I do in my work.
I think it's interesting that you've been open about your own mental health journey and depression. And I think that's allowed a lot of people to feel like they can talk about it too. So thank you. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that you set out just to help somebody, and it ends up being that you're in the lane of something that you need.
Sure.
That you're creating something that maybe wish somebody else had created and could have helped.
Totally.
You.
And I feel really thankful because I mean, there's nights where I'm standing on stage saying something, even saying things I've said a bunch of times before. And I'm aware that I'm almost talking to myself at times. Like I'm speaking out of my own need. And so I'm thankful to have not just this job, but this outlet to be honest. And I feel like I get to bring my whole self and bring my heart to work. I don't know. I'm thankful to have this space that's such a big part of my life where I can talk openly about what I'm dealing with. And then the cool thing is that good can actually come from that.
A big part of your job is you're out on the road by yourself, speaking at colleges and events nonstop. I mean,
it might not be as much as people think. I feel like
have you pulled back?
I feel like I'm home more than people assume, and probably speaking a little less than a few years back.
Because a few years back, it was...
Yeah.
That's a hard life. I mean, you're just out there on the road, not with a team.
There are times I get to have people with me. Like if I'm doing an event with a musician, my sister and I have traveled together a lot over the years. So certainly whoever's with me, they're playing a part, but there's also just the healthy part of not being alone. That is, there's a big difference. I mean, you can travel a ton, but just...
No, not like you guys. I mean, I might go once or twice a month.
But I guess what I mean is just, how cool the difference between being alone on the road and connecting with people who care about you.
I was talking to some comedian friends that I have and just asking about life on the road. And they said it's the toughest thing, the loneliness of you have this great show or like maybe speaking in front of people and you're connecting with people and you're pouring into them and you feel that, I mean, number one, that's exhilarating and kind of gives you affirmation, builds you up. But then, you're pouring out and you go back to the hotel and you're just alone and solo. And these friends I was talking to really struggle with depression and loneliness as well. And I was like, you have chosen a life of solitude. That is not good for you, but that's just what they have to do to make a living doing what they love, Do you ever feel like that? That like kind of the work you've signed up for where you're talking about these heavy, heavy issues, you've essentially like isolated yourself on the road a lot. Like, do you feel like that?
I honestly think like I mentioned, I don't have to be alone probably as much as people would guess. And even the last couple that come to mind, I've been able to connect with people I really care about. Like the two of the last events, one was Ottawa, and I connected with the guy that was my youth pastor growing up. Like I hadn't seen him in years, and he brought his son to the event and we had lunch the next day. And so some of it I think is being intentional. Like you can either be alone in your room, or at this point, I know a bunch of people in a bunch of places. I was in San Diego most recently and, got to see Bob Goff and got to see a couple other friends. So some of it I think is the flip side of that is like, man, I get to see people who I love who live in all these different places. But I think some of it is choosing, and I'm also an introvert, but I think
again, you're an introvert and you've chosen a line of work where you have to speak all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think some of it's just learning boundaries and learning I need some of that alone space to recharge. But I'm thankful for those moments or those opportunities to connect with friends, even longtime friends or people I don't get to see a lot in so many of these places. We also have a ton of former interns by now. We have, I think, over 200 former interns. So most places I go, like someone shows up.
Do you remember them?
I mean, some more than others.
Dude, I saw on Twitter the other day, somebody commented on something that we posted. And so I followed her back and cause I saw a lot of common stuff. And then she said that her next tweet was 11 years after interning for Relevant, I finally got Cameron Strang to follow me on Twitter. And I was like, I do not recognize this person at all. We've been doing this a long time, dude.
Yeah, totally.
It's a lot of interns.
I think too, even if there's not like a closeness, there's an appreciation of like, at some point you gave up 3 or 4 months to move to this sleepy beach town in Florida and you care enough to want to come back to an event years later. So I don't know. I'm a fan of our intern program.
Yeah,
you know,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned a second ago in passing that about, how you are with life on the road now and things, and, the things that you've learned of making, kind of a life and life decisions that are good for you. Like, you've learned things. What are the things that you've learned that have helped you in your journey and kind of brought healing and balance to you?
I think I got comfortable telling people it's okay to go to counseling and it's okay to take meds. I got comfortable with all these ideas I genuinely believed in, but they weren't steps that I had taken at the time, maybe 10 years ago. And these are now things that are a part of my everyday life. I'll go to counseling tomorrow morning, and I'm so thankful that once a week I have this appointment and I have this hour to be honest, and I have this person that helps me process. And I know you've done counseling. I've been on antidepressants for a number of years. And then I think even in the last couple of years, adding to that list, self-care is a bit of a loaded term, but I think just realizing there are all these other things I'm allowed and maybe even need to care about. How much I sleep, what I eat, do I exercise, do I prioritize relationships, even reconnecting with like being a basketball fan and being a surfer, things that I think it could be tempting to think, oh, that's kid stuff. That's stuff you're into when you're younger and you have a bunch of free time. But I think just coming back to some of these maybe identity questions, but also just who am I? What makes me feel alive? What makes me happy? Or what are some things that bring joy? And, even now, like I got a puppy 3 weeks ago. I think just knowing I need to have a well-rounded life. I need to have a life that's more than just my identity as it relates to Write Love on Her Arms and the work that I do within that.
What brought you to that point where you had to start making changes? Was it just how you internally felt, like you were running on fumes, you kind of felt empty, burned out? Or did something externally
I think a combination, but there have definitely been a couple times where it was external in the sense of people stepped in and said, we're really concerned. Like essentially our leadership, a couple of different times, usually around breakups in my life. So like normally navigating heartache.
You bottom out hard.
Yeah. So
I don't mean that judgmental.
No, totally.
You go deep, and then when it ends, it's like you're knocked out for a year.
Yeah. And I'm thankful, even though those were really awkward, hard moments. You sit down at a meeting that you think, or maybe you don't know what it's about, and it ends up being about you and how much you're struggling. Years ago, there were a couple of times where they said, I was booked to speak somewhere, and they said, we don't think you should go. Like, we're not going to let you go. We're going to send someone else, or we're going to cancel these. Like, you have to take care of yourself, not alone. So really hard conversations that led to, or maybe gave me permission and challenged me to realize, whoa, some things have to change. This has to be a season where I work on my healing. I went away to on-site one summer, and the organization and even primarily our leadership has been really encouraging. And then also not only mental health related, but even about a year and a half ago when our team sat me down and just said, hey, you seem unhappy. You seem uninspired. Like, let's talk about your role and what you want what you want your life to look like. And so that led to a sabbatical and some of the changes to my role. So I think they've been a mix of, I think we know to some extent when we're really struggling, but at times we need other people to sit us down and tell us what they see and how it's affecting the people around us. I
have a friend named Brian Carpenter who runs this organization called Refuge Foundation, and they're up in Montana. And he was in ministry, in church ministry, and a large church in Billings. And I believe the story is that the pastor of this massive church, which he was on staff, burned out and left. And it was devastating to him, to the community and stuff. And so he started kind of grabbing guys who are in the ministry world and saying come to Billings, like, let's get away, let's fly fish, let's just like, form relationships. Because, so many people who are leading organizations, now that context is churches, but leading organizations are very isolated and very alone.
Yeah.
And they burn out all the time. Brian told me that of his heart is to go after pastors and church leaders who, it's like an epidemic of people, like after X number of years, like leave the ministry, they go to business or whatever, because it just takes such an emotional toll on them, and they're so alone and so isolated and stuff. And he said something like, I think the stat was, for every 100 people who graduate seminary, 1 will retire in vocational ministry.
Wow.
And so he's just like, he's got a heart for that. But like, I've been a recipient of that kind of like, hey, come get out of the normal life, like come for a week every year or 2 weeks a year. One year was 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And go up to Montana, which is totally out of your context, and like, let's fly fish and just, be friends.
Yeah.
With other guys who get your life, It's so important that like we reach out to each other and like, cause it's just, like you're talking about like basically burning out.
Yeah.
And so many people, people who might be listening to this who are in leadership of some sort or are out in front of something, it's like we're always chasing, we're very entrepreneurial, we're going to go change the world. We have big dreams. We're going to start a nonprofit, or we're going to save South Sudan or something. It seems like we're surrounded by people, this generation's full of people who have big dreams, but self-care gets forgotten.
Yeah.
And they go and they're striving and achieving and go. And then like 10 years later, they're on fumes. Either they're coping, they're medicating in some form. They have unhealthy coping habits or, affairs, or they flame out.
Sure.
I'm proud of you, man. Like that you're like kind of midstream. Like for the last several years, you've like made adjustments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
no, man,
where are you now? I'm in LA. Like, where are you in LA? I don't know. I moved here for 3 months.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just like,
sure.
Oh no, I'm back in Florida now, but now I'm not running Try Love anymore. And
sure.
It's crazy.
No, man, I appreciate that. Even the puppy is not an efficient decision. You know what I mean? Like
that's why I haven't gotten one yet.
Yeah.
My son really wants one.
And like for me, like I've never been married. I don't have kids. And I think, I'm 39, and there's this feeling of like waiting for life to start. Like, oh, when I finally meet that person, life will start. And I think
we'll get a house, we'll get a puppy.
Realizing like I don't have to keep waiting. I can make some decisions, and I'm responsible for the things I do have control of now. And I fell in love with a friend's dog in LA, like in a way I never had, and thought about it. And it was like,
is that a Labradoodle?
She's a Yorkie poo.
Oh.
It's a little black Yorkie poo puppy. But it was like, man, it felt really healthy, to be, it's not rocket science. It's like this dog loves me, and I get to love this dog back. And I love like it slows, it's like potty training and waking up at night, and probably like having a baby to some extent. But I don't know, that was even a cool choice of like, there are challenges and even reasons not to get a dog. I travel a good amount, but this feels healthy. Like it might be slow on certain days, especially with a puppy, but it feels healthy. Even someone said it this way, like you wake up and your first thought is not yourself, because there's this little creature that has needs. What
did it destroy? Well,
yeah. And like it wants to wake up and play and go to the bathroom. And after a lot of years of kind of doing whatever I wanted, that feels really healthy.
So you're intentionally like making changes to create more margin. It sounds like, you're not in the office every day. You're making space for counseling, things like that.
Yeah.
And then now you're starting to shift to like making it that your life is about things other than.
Yeah. And I think just hoping that it can be healthy. Like I still feel a real sense of purpose and a lot of gratitude with what I get to do for work. I just know that there has to be more in my life, and So I think, yeah, just thinking about a longer list than I did 5 or 10 years ago.
Do you struggle with identity?
Yeah, definitely.
Because your identity was you were the To Write Love guy.
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't have the biggest vote or the loudest voice at the organization today, and that's humbling and healthy.
Is that your choice?
I mean, that was where we landed. Like, I was basically given the question, "What do you want?" And as I answered that question, that was part of how that played out. You know what I mean? It's like, if you don't want to be a traditional executive director or CEO, we still need one of those. We actually have 2 of those, co-executive directors. So I wanted some freedom and independence, not total separation, but some. And with that came giving up some power and elevating some other people. But a year and a half into that change, there are still challenging moments, when you sort of create this thing, you found this thing, and it's kind of your baby for a dozen years, that to let go, even to some extent, has certainly been challenging. But it also feels healthy, especially when I see us thriving, like when I see things I'm really proud of that I didn't have a ton to do with. Like, I'm really thankful that it is bigger than me, but challenging for sure.
I want to remind you that this episode of Unedited is brought to you by World Vision and their upcoming Global 6K for Water. It's a one-day event on May 4th where people from all over the world walk and run 6K in their own neighborhoods to bring lasting clean water to children in need. And it's not too late for you to take part. Not many people know this, but World Vision is the #1 provider of clean water in Africa. So there's no better organization to get behind for this important cause. And this is a perfect event to help raise money to make a difference. Now, why is it 6K? 6 kilometers is actually the average distance women and kids in the developing world walk for clean water. Every step you take is one they'll no longer have to. The event takes place May 4th. The whole Relevant team is running it, and we love for you to run with us. You don't have to be athletic. Everyone can participate. Whether you're in LA or Dallas or Minneapolis or anywhere else across the country, you can find a group to join or even host your own group like we're doing here in Orlando. Search for groups in your area or find out how to host your own at worldvision6k.org. Sign up today. Now, back to the conversation. Here's Jamie Tworkowski. Do you see them? Are they making changes that you wouldn't do? I mean, are you like...
No, not...
But so you set strong enough of a direction that the team's just taking it further. It's not like...
Yeah, and they're also really respectful, and like I still get to be... I'm also on the board, but they include me in a lot of things, especially big picture, creative, key campaigns, even things like buying a building or new hires. I feel grateful with how often and how much I still get to be a part of. But no, I wouldn't say there's been things where it's like, oh, what are we doing? And I also feel like there's an open line of communication where I can express concerns. And I do. I've just had to learn how to do that in a healthy way where I can't bring anything to anyone on our team at any time, but I can bring things to our leadership.
So okay, you're 39, you got a puppy, you've let go of a lot of the organization that you started. It's maturing. It's 13. It's not a startup anymore. You've got a lot of life in front of you. What do you see? Like, what do you envision?
Yeah. So I love to communicate. And I think part of what I realized that led to the transition and part of what other people helped me realize was like, man, you don't love being in meetings and being on conference calls, and you don't love all the decisions that go with running a day-to-day organization.
Yeah, I hate that stuff.
Yeah, but you love being creative with the hope of moving people to stay alive and to get help and all the things that got To Write Love on Our Arms started. So I think the idea is, how do we free me up to write and to speak? And I for a while felt like a writer who didn't have time to write. Like I was in all these meetings and things that I was frustrated about, So it was sort of the idea of, why don't we free you up to play to your strengths? So it's like, I really want to continue to write. I had a book come out that was a dream come true. And so the hope is to do that again.
It was the New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
Right?
So that, it was to get to have a book published, I'm aware, is super special. And then to have it be well received and even to end up on that list, was amazing. And I want to keep writing, and that feels like something I'm supposed to do. I want to keep speaking for sure at a pace that's healthy and sustainable. So I don't want to be gone all the time. But I actually do love the come and go. It actually, even living in Florida, it breaks up. I'm good at being in Florida for a couple weeks and then taking off for a few days. And I dig the travel. Even the introvert in me can do that, can do a couple days away, or, I don't know how you are on a plane. I like having some of that time alone.
Oh man, planes. I am the biggest. Okay. So I'm an introvert too.
Yeah.
You can turn it on, when you need to.
Sure.
But when I travel, man, I put on headphones when I get out of the car at the airport, and the headphones are still on when I get to the hotel.
Yeah.
I am in a cocoon the entire time. I love it.
Sure. So
it's recharging.
So yeah, it's I want to write, I want to speak, I want to be creative. I'm thankful to still get to be a part of this organization that I believe in, and to still get to play a role there, to work with people I love. My sister is one of our executive directors. My mom is on our staff. My best friend since I was a kid is our CMO. So it's I get to show up, even if it's a little less, I get to show up and be with people and work with people I love and cheer them on. So yeah, I think in terms of the purpose is maybe not all that different. Just how my days are spent looks a little different than a couple years ago.
Why do you think things have changed so much in the area that you're in, mental health, the conversation around that? Why do you think things, because it seems like on one hand, back around when you guys were starting, nobody really talked about it. Now everybody will openly talk about it, but it almost seems like the extreme, like it's more of an epidemic now. And I don't know if it's more of an epidemic now because everybody's more aware of it, or are things getting harder?
The two things that come to mind, and I feel like you touched on it, the need is tremendous, so logically, when we keep seeing headlines about an overdose or a suicide or, a mental health study, that gets people thinking and talking. And then I think the good part of it is, as more and more people in more and more circles talk openly about these things, it makes it easier. You and I love the NBA, and DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love spoke up about a year ago about dealing with anxiety, and for Kevin Love having a panic attack during a game. And all of a sudden it made it easier for all of those players and also us fans to think about it, to talk about it, to know that's part of being human at every level, no matter what you do for a job. And I think we see that in so many different circles. That's just the NBA. But we know that these issues affect so many different kinds of people. And I think as more and more people speak up, we just begin to realize that, wow, so many people feel how I feel or have been where I am. Maybe I don't have to fake it. I don't have to hide it. Maybe it's okay not only to talk about it, but to get the help I need. So I think it's the problem is great and approaches epidemic proportions, like in certain parts. But then I think the hopeful side is just that we see maybe the stigma broken down a bit as the conversation gets louder.
But going back to the NBA, Adam Silver sat down with, I think it was Bill Simmons not long ago. The NBA commissioner was interviewed by Bill Simmons, and he said, it was like 2-3 weeks ago, he said he's been in the NBA for decades, a couple decades. And the players today are unhappy
I saw that.
you know, and he's going, it's social media. It's all, you know, it's not just like, you know, now that it's more okay to talk about it, DeMar DeRozan says it. It's that the players today truly are dealing with more anxiety and more unhappiness and more mental health issues than in years past.
Yeah.
Why?
Man, I think it comes back to some of what we've touched on is like, okay, we know, you and I know a lot of the steps to take, a lot of the advice, a lot of the facts. And those NBA guys have unique lives, unique incomes. They stay in the coolest, like so much about their lives are cool. But the things I hope for you and for myself, the steps that you need to take when you're struggling and I need to take when I am, all of that is true for those guys and for anyone else, where it's like, are we actually healthy? Does anyone actually know me? Do I actually have honest conversations? Do I have a counseling relationship? You know, it's like these guys are with trainers all the time, working on their bodies and, you know, keeping them ready to play. But what about mental health? Like, so I think whether you're in the NBA or you work at Starbucks or Relevant or anywhere, it's like we all get to figure out, am I willing to be healthy? Like, what does it look like to fight for that and to prioritize that, you know, from counseling to meds to self-care to relationships?
I have a friend who had a really hard upbringing and she struggles with that. Like it comes up a lot, and fear of abandonment and different things that are direct results of her upbringing. And, you know, she knows that she's struggling with these things. We've even talked about it. And she desires help to get better or feel better or heal from those things, but can't afford counseling and can't afford the medication and things like that. It's almost like a luxury option.
Sure.
What about all the people out there, especially like college students, or the people who don't know where to turn, or like, I can't afford $75 an hour every week, you know, that kind of a thing.
Sure. I mean, that's a real thing. One thing we're really proud of as an organization, we've had a find help section of our website for years. And in most recent years, it was broken down by state and by city and list of resources in these different places. And now you can enter your zip code and you'll get a list of free and reduced rate services. And we've also found, like you mentioned, college students, that college campuses are often best case scenario because it's built in to your tuition, where more often than not, it's free or they make it as affordable as possible. There's also grad students who are becoming counselors who have to see people for, you know, hundreds of hours. And so those become more affordable options. I think sometimes people overlook insurance, the insurance piece. Certainly we dream about a world where mental health isn't treated any differently than physical health. And in the same way you have a copay, we feel like our bodies are taken care of. I think we hope and want that and think people deserve that relative to mental health as well. But I think we try to tell people that maybe there are some more affordable options than you're aware of. Even, you know, I'm thinking now 12-step meetings, group sessions. So I think we try to just encourage people not to give up before they start, in the sense of, I could never afford that. Even us as an organization, we also provide scholarship dollars so that people can get the help they need when they can't afford it. And certainly we're not the only ones who do that.
I think and then the other side of it, you know, like giving up before they start, I think is a big thing. It's like, well, okay, I guess it'd be good to talk to a counselor. You know, my dad left when I was a kid. I should probably work through that. You know, they've shoved that down somewhere. But they're like, I'm working. I'm busy. I got kids now, or just whatever. There's always excuses.
Sure.
What do you say to the people who are like, don't see it. Because I think the person who, okay, I've hit rock bottom, or I'm struggling with depression, or the story that you told in the first day of this, of Renee's story of like suicide and different things that are like extreme circumstances. Okay, you've hit rock bottom, you need help. But what about the person who's just coping,
Yeah.
And they don't see it as a crisis where I've got to get help. It's almost like, life's too busy or whatever, or money's tight. Like, what do you say to them? Like, I don't know, they don't think it's urgent.
Sure.
Them,
I think for me, I've been out of the crisis space for a few years. And yet, honestly, this hour a week counseling appointment probably feels even now like the most significant hour of the week for me. And it's like tomorrow at 11, driving 40 minutes is not ideal, right? Like it's not super efficient, but it does feel worth it. And so I think I would just challenge and invite people to take that step. And maybe you go for 2 months, or maybe you go a couple times, or maybe you go for a couple years. But like, if you feel like something is off, not necessarily crisis, but like there are questions or pain or grief or things that you wish were different, like there are people, really intelligent, compassionate people who want to meet you in those places and help you process. And I don't know how to sell anyone on it except to say I've seen it not only change my life, but the lives of friends, family members, and then thousands of people that we represent as an organization.
I've noticed the medical industry is putting this a little more front and center now too, like it's there's an ad campaign going on right now for Cigna Health or something like that. And they have celebrities talking about, talk to your doctor if you're feeling stress or anxiety or whatever, that like medical professionals are now getting into the psychological health space, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it really seems like a shift, like we're in a moment.
Sure.
And I keep wondering, it's amazing that we're talking about it. It's amazing that it's more out in front, but I'm like, it feels like it's getting bigger and the crisis is getting deeper, like maybe it's social media, there's a generation coming up that is aspiring to fake connections on Instagram.
Sure. Yeah.
And like, that's all they know.
Yeah.
And like their entire self-worth is determined by this thing. You and I didn't grow up like that.
Yeah, no.
And it's like, I feel a burden for the generation behind us.
And I think too, like even thinking about headlines, I mean, almost, every few days, it's like another article about, are we going to overheat the planet? Are we going to go to nuclear war? Like for people that deal with anxiety, like there are a lot of things to be anxious about, So I think we see that factor in as well. Just like,
and it's almost like, what's the point then?
Oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a defeatist, if you're a Christian, you're like, God has a plan and purpose for all this. But like, if you struggle with anxiety and depression, you're looking at the state of things. Things are getting more divisive, more violent, more grim. I mean, the future looks bleaker.
Yeah.
That's that. And then, all your relationships are on your phone, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
Like you feel lonely and isolated. You're never going to be pretty enough or successful enough. That's rough.
Got people dealing with debt and divorce and cancer and things that have been around for,
So maybe that's why it seems like the problems are getting worse, or like there's more of a need to have this conversation. Maybe this is why Adam Silver's saying this generation of basketball players are unhappy.
Well, I think even maybe the idea, and this isn't like an expert study, but you and I grew up where if you wanted to connect with someone say when we were in junior high or high school, you had to make a phone call and like make plans. And now it's like, even as adults, we text way more than we talk, like to everyone. There's days I feel like where I don't talk on the phone.
You showed up here, and now you're saying that we never spoke on the phone about you coming over.
Sure. And I just mean, even in general, like I remember, if you liked a girl, you had to call her and probably talk to her
that was terrifying.
Dad and then ask, and now it's like, so I think there was this element of being known and, stepping into all that, where I think so many people, adults included, like we live typing and we live looking at our phones.
So I'm just like, what is the model then? Because it's not realistic for us to say, it's almost like we've opened the door to, the social media ubiquitousness and the way we are with our phones, you know, that's going to be that way or worse forever. You know, like the awareness of all the, the information age has brought us aware of all the global issues. It's not like we're going to like go back to a smaller realization. So like, what's the balance? We talked about like some friends and I were talking about recently, like digital detoxes and like, there are people who are like gotten off all social media and they almost wear it like a badge. Like, well, that's just dumb. I'm sorry. But like, don't look down. We use it. We like it. Don't look down your nose on me either, because like, you're not like some better person because you deleted Instagram. But it's like, but what do you think the balance is? What's the model we should hold up? What should we be aspiring to that like would be a balanced, healthy life? You've been making intentional changes for 2-3 years in your lifestyle, your work, your travel, a dog, things. What should be the thing? Like maybe we all like have a Sabbath of media or something, like,
I think the numbers might look different for different people, but I just think, how do we prioritize real relationships? Like, how do we make time and space to do this, almost that idea of, it's almost like, did we have to do a podcast to have a, you know what I mean? Like kind of the irony. I was with John Foreman. I saw Switchfoot about a week ago and John pulled up Instagram and he told me he has a 20-minute timer. He has like a 20-minute screen time. So he gives himself 20 minutes a day to be on Instagram, which is probably way less than most people. And so he's figured out that boundary. And I was just like, whoa, that's really cool. That's really impressive. So it wasn't this all or nothing. It lets him post about the show and promote whatever and then live his life.
Boundaries.
And I think balance.
It's almost like you kind of, at least my personality is like, you go all in for something and go all in chasing something. And then, eventually you realize, okay, I need to course correct to pull in here and have a little boundary on that thing. I think boundaries are key. If I'm deducing the changes you made with your life, it's like adding margin, putting boundaries on, sleep, protecting sleep and relationships and time.
Well, and I think too, it's like it's not just about Instagram. I think it's also that question of, or what's connected is what else could we be doing with that time? Could I go get dinner with a friend? Could I make a phone call to catch up with someone I haven't talked to in a while? Could I read a book? You know what I mean? Like, so we all get the same amount of hours. And I think it's that question of, do we settle for sort of this virtual life and swiping and liking? And again, we're all going to probably do some of that, but what else? What's even better? What would help me really feel known and loved in a way that Instagram can't provide?
I like that. That's to step back and be intentional about that for your own life, to say like, okay, it's even like when your team sat you down at work and said, okay, what's the thing that will bring you life? What's the life you want to have? It's like, get a clear vision of that thing and pursue it.
Yeah. And
if you're tired of being fat and you feel tired all the time, get clarity of like, well, what do you want to feel and look like?
Sure.
And there are steps you can take.
Yeah. And part of what they were saying was, you don't have to keep going through the motions. So like, you don't have to just, I remember it felt like school, where it was like, oh, I guess I show up here and I wait almost for the bell to ring, And I think we do that with our phones. And so, right, like you just kind of go, this is what I do. I look through my phone and I like a few things and I feel like I'm missing out, So the idea of, okay, well, what would be the best use of this time? Like
the FOMO thing, a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my friends are having fun without me. And now you feel lonely.
Yeah.
I didn't feel lonely a minute ago. And now I feel lonely.
Yeah. And the idea, like we all have these highlight reels, like, right. That's like, we kind of pick and choose the trophies that we hold up throughout the day or throughout the week. And that's become an interesting one to me, because it's nothing against posting or like kind of curating these things that are fun and that we're proud of. But I love to ask people, like, what about the other moments, like the hard moments? Who meets you in those places? And it's not that you have to be brave and show it on Instagram, but like, are there people who meet you in your pain and in your questions and the things you wish were different? And I think that's what it really means to be known and to be honest.
Other than your counselor, do you?
Counselor is a big one. I think I've made an effort in the last couple of years to be closer and more open with my family and my closest friends. I mean, the counseling relationship's really special, where it just feels pure in a way. Like we don't have to stumble into it. It's like, we have an hour, we're going to go there. She's going to ask me really, like, she knows what she's doing. She's going to ask questions. She'll call me out if she thinks I'm dodging something. I think there's more layers when it's like a friend or a family member, but I definitely think I've made space for that. And I think even things like knowing I want to get dinner once a week or every couple of weeks with my best friend to like properly catch up and talk about how we're both doing. Even though our lives look pretty different, he has a wife and 2 kids, our struggles are different, but I feel like I'm intentional. But I also think I would love to have a few more people on that list, in terms of people I feel close to.
Why do you talk so much on social media about being single?
I think
because you know what? It's brilliant. Because when you post about Jamie being just wanting to find the one, and I love I'm tired of not having her in my life, and I look and there are 97 comments from ladies raising their hand. It's like, man, you genius.
No, you love to tease me. For what it's worth, I would say it's not strategic.
I know it's not strategic. Yeah. I know.
But
I also being transparent. But I'm like, look,
it is a funny one. Yeah. I sometimes joke, it's like what 90-something% of songs are about is that longing and love and figuring it out and losing someone. So I think it's something I think about every day, and it's a part of my life I wish was different and hope will be different in time. And so I think at times that just comes out.
Is that part of why, like, when you go on sabbaticals from time to time, you'll go to like LA or New York? Because Melbourne, Florida isn't where she probably lives.
Yeah, I don't know. My last several, almost all of my significant romantic relationships were women who lived in other places. And man, God can do whatever he wants. Love can do whatever it wants. Like I could be surprised and would love to be, even in my hometown. But my track record is that I've connected with people who live in other places. And sometimes, this is probably true for you too, sometimes feel more like-minded or like you have more in common with people in some of these cities.
Yeah, I have more friends in LA than I do here.
Yeah.
Well, in New York too, frankly, but mainly LA. It's weird.
You can't get your seats at the Laker games though.
Nope. It's one of those reasons, you know what? Think about that for real. Like I Cohen's growing up. Maybe I'll live somewhere else one day. Right. But I love going to those basketball games so much. Like I don't know that I would be happier in another city, because I love going to Orlando Magic games. You're talking about like, what's the kind of life you want?
Yeah.
I want, like, I kind of had that. I got divorced 5-6 years ago, and I've over those years like had to think about that. Like, okay, chapter 2, what is this going to look like tangibly? And I was living in the house I had lived in for 10 years at that time. And this isn't the house I want. I had a dream of a house. I really had a dream of a house. It was a U-shaped, modern 1-story house with a pool in the middle, like it's a U-shape. And then, and the whole back of it would be glass, and it'd be overlooking a lake, and there'd be a boat back there. And it's like real estate. They say like price, location, size, pick 2, I'm not, if I want water, which there's water all over Florida, it ain't going to be in the city. I want to live in the city. If houses in suburban Orlando are not modern, you know what I mean? It's just like, this house doesn't exist. And then I stumbled across this house that I'm in now. That was a mid-century modern house. I'd sat empty for 20 years. I could see this was the house. And it's a U-shaped house with a pool on a lake and I have a boat in the back. And it is absolutely a house made for friends. And I want to be the house that when my kid is a teenager or whatever, it's the house that all the kids want to come to. And I want it to be like after church on Sunday afternoons, every Sunday, everybody knows, just come over.
Yeah.
And we're grilling and there's music and people in the pool. You know what I mean? That's the life I want to have. I want my life to be about other people.
Yeah.
You know? And I realized I had to make tangible steps to do that. And I needed to, okay, so I'm going to invest in the things that will be the life that I envision that will bring me fulfillment and joy and purpose. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's so important to do. You're doing that right now. I had to do that because of the divorce. You just can't keep on doing the same old thing. You got to figure out the new era.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people don't get ahead of it. They wait for the burnout or the bottoming out.
Yeah.
And then they have to make changes.
Sure.
I just wish people I wish I would have known. I wish we could have all known, pursue margin, pursue health, okay, what is the thing? What's the life? And let's go after that.
Have you ever heard Bob Goff talk about having conversations with the next guy, like the next version? Like every time I think he just turned 60. So he's always worded it like guy 4, guy 5, guy 6.
Yeah. Cause he talks about the decade.
Yeah. So so he's always talking to himself, like kind of the next version. And I know even now it's like becoming a granddad and making space for that. And so I think that to me is really healthy and really cool. The idea of thinking ahead and then making space and making changes. Like he's realized, hey, I want to be home more to be with my grandkids. And how do so some things will have to happen to do that. And that, he shared that with me and it felt really, it felt significant.
Time flies, and I've, we all have dreams of things like, it'd be cool if, and then you look up and it's 10 years later and the thing didn't happen, and it's like, I'm 40, I just turned 43 a couple weeks ago. And I'm like, I don't want to be old and I never did X, Y, and Z. And so doing things like this year, I need deadlines. I need to say yes to something and commit to it. And then I can't get out of it. If I want to have a life where I'm in better health without a goal and a deadline, I'm not going to get up and get on the treadmill every morning. I'm just not. I'm lazy. I just don't want to do that. I don't like running. Well, then I go sign up for marathons. And I did. I mean, and I'm like, crap. Well, now I have to have to get up and get on the treadmill. Well, now the byproduct is I'm going to be healthier and I'm going to have discipline and I'm going to have routine. And that's going to be good for me in many ways.
Sure.
Because I'm scared of failing at the marathon. You know what I mean? And so it's that's the mode I'm in right now.
Yeah.
It's what's the person I want to be? How do I get from here to there? And then that would do it, And so just say yes and just do the hard work,
Yeah.
You're an inspiration, man. I mean, it's when we talked a year ago, you were in the process, you had just kind of pseudo stepped down and you're kind of coming back from being in LA and then you went back to LA you were still figuring it out. It seemed like it was wet cement.
Sure.
Changes were happening, but you didn't know what it looked like. And you seem now more grounded and more clear. And you've taken the steps and you are taking steps toward this guy 4 or whatever, It's really cool to see.
Thank you, man.
I'm excited to see what you end up writing, I knew your first book was the book. I'm curious to see what comes out of this,
Thank you, man. Me too.
It's exciting. Hey, thanks for joining us, man. I know a lot of people are going to be impacted by your story. And obviously millions have been impacted by the work you and your team have done. And I'm just really, it's been awesome watching you from afar for the last 13 years, you know?
Oh, dude, thank you for, that many years of support and friendship.
I am a monthly giver.
I know. I found that out maybe the last time I saw you, and I love that.
Still going.
Thank
I have
you.
my chip in the car.
So cool.
The little medal y'all gave us. And
Yeah.
stuff, it's like, it's in my drink tray.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I love the work you're doing. Love you, buddy.
Thank you, man. Love you too.
That was Jamie Tworkowski. Make sure to check out his organization, To Write Love on Our Arms, at TWLOHA.org. It's an acronym. And pick up his best-selling book, If You Feel Too Much. You'll love it. Hey, if you like this episode of Unedited, I'd love your help spreading word about the show. Subscribing, rating, and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts helps a ton, as well as sharing it on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to Relevant Magazine. We're running a great deal right now at relevantmagazine.com/subscribe. Hey, thanks for listening. I'm Cameron Strang. I'll see you next time here on Unedited.
Relevant Podcast Network.